Hello, everybody. Welcome back to SiouxperCon 2020. With me, as always, to my left, this time, Alex, AP. How you doing? And
Good. Hello.
Garrett down below. My name is Marvin. We're here with SiouxperCon 2020 for Wednesday Comics Podcast. And with us today is Rob Guillory. Thank you, Rob, for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having us. Or having me, I'm sorry. I need my second cup of coffee.
It is it is early, especially for you. You're on the East Coast, is that correct?
No, I'm actually in Louisiana.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
How are things doing down there? You guys got a hurricane coming, don't you?
Yeah, we actually got spared. We weren't entirely sure. I mean, it was supposed to hit us at a Category 3, and then at the last minute it kind of veered to the west and hit about an hour and a half away from us. So we were fine, but about an hour and a half away in Lake Charles, it was pretty disastrous.
Oh, I see. We actually had spoken to Phil. Phil lives in Iowa, and they had that. What is that called, Alex?
Tornado?
No, what's that thing that happened in Iowa? That land hurricane.
Sometimes get microbursts.
They had like a land hurricane thing, and so same thing for him. It was like an hour ahead of him, or an hour north of him. So glad to hear you guys are okay over there, Rob. So Rob currently is writing the book Farmhand and drawing. Prior to that, I think a lot of people know you from your work on Chew. I actually had a question because Chew is actually doing kind of like a second series now. It's called Chew still, but now it's referring to the character's last name instead of chewing on food. I saw you were doing some of those covers for them. Do you have any other kind of involvement in that series, or?
No. I mean, we wanted to really give Tony Boltwood, the artist, or Dan Boltwood, the new artist on it. We wanted to give him the space to really like make it his. And I'm busy enough with Farmhand as it is, so I kind of wanted to kind of pull back and let them do their thing and really make Chew, the new Chew CHU, its own thing. It's been a lot of fun to kind of like have the opportunity to do these covers. It was kind of a pleasant surprise. But yeah, no, that's pretty much the depth of my involvement on it. I get all the PDFs as they come in, as they finish them. But for the most part, I'm completely separate from that book.
Now,
Was it hard to hand over the reins to it?
What's that?
Was it hard to hand over the reins from Chew, CHEW, over to this and be like, I'm willing to give up the art for that?
Yeah, I mean, it Farmhand made it easier because my schedule is so backed up. There was just no way I could have done it. And I mean, when we finished Chew, we always knew we would return to it in some capacity. I mean, we were talking about a sequel to Chew in the middle of Chew. I mean, we already knew the ending, and we already knew where we'd go with it next. It was just a matter of timing. So whenever Chew finished, the first Chew, I actually wasn't sure what I was going to be doing with myself. I mean, I knew I wanted to go back to writing my own stuff. Before Chew, I was writing my own stuff. So I knew I wanted to return to that. But, you know, Chew was really easy. I mean, John and I worked together really, really well. There was never any drama. It was just easy. And we already had a fan base. So there's a part of me that really kind of, when we finished the first Chew, said, okay, so like, what are we doing next? And he didn't have anything for me. It's like, oh crap, so I guess I have to do my own thing now. So that kind of led to me doing my own thing. But he did kick around Chew Outer Darkness, the crossover we did earlier this year. He actually wrote that before we ever finished the first Chew series. It's been in script form for years now. I was actually going to draw the whole thing originally, but again, time-wise, it just wasn't working out with Farmhand taking as much time as it does take. But yeah, no, it was definitely strange giving the art away, but at the same time, I think the first Chew series was so complete, and we did exactly what we wanted to do, which I wanted to do a book that was just the same creative team throughout the entire thing, no fill-in issues. I mean, really, we only had, I think, one guest cover the entire time. So I wanted it to be our thing. And I think we achieved that. So it was a lot easier to kind of give this away. And, at some point we'll return to it. I think John and I already kind of have some ideas for how we could potentially do a Chew sequel, something. We'll see. Again, it's a timing issue again.
And I think also like you said, it was contained. You had a little bit. I think you had like a 2 to 3 issue Pollo spin-off that happened too. And like you said, there was been crossovers. So there's a lot that came from that. And the thing I loved about you, especially part of your artwork, and I wanted to ask you about, is that not only was the art telling the story, but in terms of comedy, like each panel was filled, if you paid attention enough, with comedic beats in the background or like little Easter eggs here and there. Like that was collaboration between the both of you, or is that something you like to throw in? Or
Well, originally it was just me screwing around. I mean, a lot of the stuff I really enjoyed coming up in comics, like everything Dave Gibbons did with Watchmen.
yeah,
But also, if you look at an artist like Jim Mafood, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with his stuff, but he has a lot of little hidden things, signs, signage, and that kind of thing in the background. And I just enjoyed always picking up their work and seeing, you know, there's always more to it that I haven't discovered just yet. So I would just find these new treasures constantly. And I just enjoyed kind of the rereadability of the thing. And I thought, you know, if I'm going to be, you know, whatever I make, I want the fans to constantly feel like they're getting their money's worth. And I want them to constantly feel like you can reread this thing over and over and over again and constantly be discovering new things. And you never feel like, it just never gets old. So with Chew, you know, I did a little bit of it in the first 2 issues. And then about issue 3, you know, we started getting these fan letters from people, and they would notice little dumb things I've done in the background. And I was like, huh, that's kind of cool. And again, like, you know, a comic collaboration is kind of like dating. So like John and I had never worked together before, so I didn't know how much I could get away with him. So I kind of didn't go full Rob until later. And in the beginning, I was just kind of dipping my toes in. But the more I kind of got that license to kind of screw around, the crazier it went. And that's when I started throwing in more Easter eggs, just crazier Easter eggs, more obvious Easter eggs. And at some point, John actually started kind of getting in on the fun because he saw how much I was having fun. Like there was stuff that I did that he probably still hasn't found yet. We would get fan mail from people and they'd say, oh, I love the Shawshank Redemption reference in issue 8. And John had no idea what they were talking about.
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it was just a really fun extra thing that kind of took on a life of its own.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like each panel, it was a joy not only to read the story, but then to go back and be like, oh, like, yeah, not only see jokes like that, or like more obvious jokes, like I forget the character, but that was obsessed with like Robert Kirkman. She had posters of Kirkman all over the place. And like
Yeah,
that recurring joke just made me laugh every time I read that. You mentioned Farmhand a few times here, and how it's kind of takes a lot of your time, and you do a lot of roles on that book. How's that process for you to do an issue? Like, what do you obviously start with probably the story, and then you move on to doing the art and stuff, or did you like come up with concepts first?
Yeah. I mean, I already have kind of like an overarching thing and for the entire story, and I knew that it was going to be about 25 to 30 issues. So I kind of usually the first step for me is I'll kind of just break out the keyboard and just say, okay, what is this arc about? You know, where does this stand in the entire epic of the story? And I'll just map out in one sentence, you know, what happens this arc. You know, arc 1 was you meet the family, you meet Freetown, and then arc 2 was, you know, things get horrible, things go horribly wrong and get really dark. Arc 3 was, you know, things start getting revealed. So it always starts there, and then from there I kind of break out into, you know, where do I want it to start, where do I want it to end, and then I chip away at the middle parts, and I just decide, okay, this is issue. Right now I'm actually writing the 4th arc right now, issues 16 through 20, and so I kind of, after I kind of have mapped out the broader scope of it, I'll go in and say, you know, okay, issue 16, this happens. How about this for 17, this for 18, this for 19, this for 20? And it just starts filling in the gaps. And then I kind of just make these crazy idea lists. And usually the way I work is I kind of just I'll sit down with a piece of paper and basically just start it from the first scene to the very last and just play it through like a movie in my head and just write everything down. And then from there, I'll go back in, scratch some things out, move some things around, that kind of thing. And then from there, I would just go directly to the script. And usually I kind of script all in one block of time. So for me, I can do about a 24 to 30 page script in a week, give or take. So that's where I'm at right now. I just wrapped issue 18 yesterday. And I'm supposed to start 19 today. Hopefully be done with that in a week. And then from there, after the script's all done, usually I like to do the entire arc worth of script at once. And then I'll go right into the art side of things. So usually penciling and inking takes me I can do about a page a day. So I'm doing FARMHAND's the issues are a little bigger, just because I'm trying to like pack it full of everything. So usually the issues are, like I said, between 24 to 30 pages. So, penciling and inking one issue usually takes me about 4 or 5 weeks-ish. And then from there, I've been working with a colorist, which, typically they're usually right behind me. Usually they take another maybe week or two besides that. And then after when I get all of those colors in, or actually before I ever get the colors in, I usually send the inks ahead to my letterer, Cody Chamberlain, and he starts kind of mapping out rough letters for the thing, the word balloons and that kind of thing. And I'll go back and revise and edit, what he sends me, the proofs of the letters. And, all while that's going on, I also have a graphic designer who does all of the design of the book at this stage. At this point, after 15 issues, we pretty much, it's like clockwork, like we just know what we're doing. So a lot of it's just filling in, fan letters or fan art, advertising for other stuff going on or whatever. So yeah, it time-wise, it's hard to kind of quantify.
Yeah.
I just know it takes all of my time.
That's what I was gonna say. It sounds like it. Like every aspect of the book, even stuff like you said, you send it off to Cody to do lettering, and then you get it back and you refine it still. So like you're constantly working on one issue. Now, just for anybody out there that's watching this in SiouxperCon audience that hasn't started FARMHAND, what's a quick, not spoilery kind of way to introduce them to the book? Like, what's the pitch for this?
The pitch is an organic farmer who grows human organs. It's a simple black farmer, South Louisiana, who ends up, kind of stumbling, having this supernatural vision that gives him all this crazy scientific knowledge that allows him to create the Jedediah seed. And it's a seed that when watered and planted, it grows into to human organs, to plant human hybrid organs. He, heals a bunch of people with it and makes a bunch of money, and then it all goes horribly wrong. And, we kind of go from there with the story. And on top of that, it's kind of like family drama and horror and comedy and some sci-fi thrown in. It's a mashup of a lot of things I love.
When you bring that up, that's what I noticed when I read the book is like how easily like the genre switches in that book so much, between the comedy and the horror and like the very deep, like emotional beats, like that's like, how do you, when you're switching in those mindsets, sorry, frog in my throat, but like, what inspires you to be able to do those different genre changes within an issue? Like, is it just how the story kind of plays out, or is it just because, like, how you did your like Easter egg, funny things in like Chew? Is that just kind of come naturally with the storytelling, like where it kind of switches around?
Yeah, I mean, I can just feel it out. I mean, the majority of my storytelling is just intuitive. I can kind of feel it plays out like music. There's a rhythm to it. So usually what happens is I'll have just kind of a feeling for like what the first scene is of a book. And I'll say, okay, I'll start with this crazy like nightmare scene. And then, if you look at issue 1, that's where we start. We start with like this typical kind of idyllic farm thing. And all of a sudden it switches over to like hardcore horror. And then, oh, wait, it's the nightmare scene. So he wakes up and he's making breakfast, and it becomes this like, it becomes your family. You're just making breakfast for your kids and getting them off to school and everything. So there's comedy all of a sudden, and then it just jumps around. But I mean, I think I think I can just feel how it needs to flow, and I think the jumping around between tones kind of freaks people out. Like people like it, but they like whenever I have these kind of conversations, they're always asking me like, how do you think about it? And the truth is, I don't know if I do think about it all that much. I mean, I think, I do think about it after I've written the first draft of an issue, and then I look back at it and I say, okay, what is this missing? I can feel something's not there. Like with issue 16, what I wrote a couple weeks back, the first draft of it came out and it was good. I let my wife read it. She's usually my like first line of defense. Yeah. If she says it's good to go. So I let her read it, and she always affirms what I already kind of innately know. And she just said, there's something's not there. Something's not there. And she said it, well, there needs to be, I can feel like where is the family at? Because it was focusing primarily on Zeke, on the main character, and you never really saw the family. And then I started thinking, well, this really is about the family. That is what's missing. They need to be here. There's a comedy element that comes with that family. There's a relatable human element that was missing in it because I was so focused on, the more far out, fantastical, farm sci-fi stuff. I was so focused on that I forgot about the most important part of it. So as soon as I brought that back in, everything else balanced out completely. So it's always problem solving. Mm-hmm. I mean, for any creative, it's always, I got this thing in my head. I think this is what it's about, but how am I going to pace this, and how am I going to tell this story in a way that's balanced, that never feels out of place, that never feels like I'm forcing something into a story. It needs to reveal itself truly and honestly. So a lot of it is just feeling the character interactions, and also feeling, because I know the arcs for the most part. I mean, look, in terms of the actual character arcs, there's only I know the broad strokes. Like I knew who Zeke would be at the beginning, and I know who he's going to be at the end. But so I have a direction to go in. But every issue, he does kind of do his own thing, which I used to think when I was just doing the art side of things, I used to think when writers would say that was a cop-out. It's like, why would the characters don't speak? Like, they're you are the character. But the truth is, when you really get into it and they start fleshing themselves out and you get to know these characters, that's when you see, oh, they do actually have personalities, because they would never do this. Like the character has an opinion, and he would not do this if I'm trying to be truly honest to who this character is. So that's half the battle in terms of like the tone. It's like, who are the characters? Where am I taking them? How would they organically react to the situations I'm throwing them into?
It always reminds me of like the Coen brothers, like Fargo. Like a lot of people have a rough time being like, what is Fargo? Because there's comedy, there's obviously the thriller of it, but also it's kind of like this weird, like Midwestern fable in a way. I mean, the story even starts like in fable-esque. And so that's what this book reminds me of. Anybody that's out there and thinking about picking this up, not only what Rob said, the pitch of the plot, but like that kind of feel of like, it's not just one thing, one genre. It's kind of just like this story that where it needs to go, it'll go. And like you said, characters, because even in the Fargo, the main character, there's a lot of stuff about her being pregnant and having breakfast with her husband, and it's like that's part of it too. That's part of the character story. So
yeah, well, I mean, if you look at a show like Breaking Bad, I mean, the way that was written blows my mind. They had, I think, kind of an overarching story, but they wrote that thing one episode at a time.
Yeah,
and they didn't force anything. So actually, if you listen to the kind of director's or the writer's commentary of like some of the last season, like not to spoil anything, but there's a scene in I think the first episode of the last season where, Bryan Cranston's character, Walter White, has a giant gun in his trunk. And Vince Gilligan, the creator, writer of it, was saying like he put that gun back there, but he had no idea what he was going to do with it later. He just put it there, and he had to figure out what he was going to do with it later on.
Yeah.
And I think that's true. Like, you have to kind of like let it evolve to an extent. Not that it doesn't need form. I mean, it does need structure, because you can't just make up. You can feel when someone's just flying by the seat of their pants and not doing it well.
Yeah.
But I think there's a way to do it that's balancing, where you have milestones, you have a vision that you're seeing through to fruition, but at the same time, you're letting it evolve, because new ideas are constantly coming in. You're processing old ideas in new ways and figuring out new ways of doing things. So you have to leave that space to kind of expand it and change it in the middle of things. It's hard to explain, but I mean, with Chew, we did that. Where, John we always knew, if we could financially do it, if the sales could support it, we were always going to go 60 issues. So we knew beginning, middle, end. But the way he did it was in 15 issue increments. So it was 60 issues. So we knew 1, we knew 15, we knew 30, and then we knew 45 and 60. But there's a lot of extras, really flexible story space in the middle of that. That kind of let us screw around with some crazy ideas, and so it's structure but also flexible.
Yeah. Well, like what you said about Walter White and the gun is almost similar to what you said about the characters being their own thing. Like, Walter put that gun in the trunk and he didn't know what he was going to do with it. So why should the writer have that idea in his head too? Like, let the story go where it's going to go and let the characters kind of lead you there. Alex, you had a question? I think I interrupted you.
Well, I was going to ask you, so you writing and doing the art for FARMHAND, is there one that's harder than the other now that you are, top dog for both parts? Is writing harder, or is figuring out how you want to set the panels harder, or who needs to be in each scene more difficult?
It's on different days. It depends. Because sometimes the writing, in terms of the time investment, writing is a breeze. I mean, I can write 5 pages of a comic in like a couple hours, but like drawing 5 pages is just going to take me a whole week. So, I mean, it depends on what we're talking about, because sometimes I'll say that one is more miserable than the other. Like, that is true. I mean, sometimes if the script's not flowing and you're just banging your head against a wall, it's hell on earth. It's the worst feeling in the world. Same with drawing. So, I mean, both are difficult in their own ways. A lot of it has to do with just where I am and how I'm dealing with what I'm doing. So a lot of it's just perception. It's hard to say which one is harder, but the art side definitely has a way bigger time investment than the writing does.
So did you even write a scene for art-wise? Like, I mean, do you even have a thought prior to you even writing it, going, okay, this is what it's going to look like, but how do I make the writing fit that scene?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I knew there was an issue 17 or 18, what I just finished. I knew there was a scene in it that actually was, I was actually going to put it in issue 5. I actually had written it for issue 5. And I just decided when I finished the script for issue 5, I just decided this is too much. This doesn't need to be here. So I just took it out. And then, 12 issues later, or 13 issues later, I come back to it in issue 18. And it was a visually potent thing that I always liked from the very beginning. It started as just a visual thing. And it fit with the story. So I wasn't like ham-fisting anything into it. But it definitely started. There was lots of times where I'll have a visual in my head and think, oh, this would be a cool thing to bring in. If it needs to obviously make sense with the story and with the characters and that sort of thing. But there's tons of times where it starts with a visual.
you were mentioning before, like you were saying, you're writing issue 16 right now. I believe is what you said.
18.
18. And you said I'll probably get that done within a week. So that also was like, oh, okay, because I know some people that take longer to write an issue. And so, like you were saying, sometimes, especially if you're in that flow and the characters are speaking to you in that way, you can get through it faster. So this series at Image, obviously you with Chew have had that kind of relationship with them. Is there any kind of, like you said, with Chew, you had a 15 arc, like not 15 arc, but 15 issue increments. With Farmhand, is obviously you know the end, but did you set it that way too? Do you know like an issue count, like how far you want to make it go?
Yeah, somewhere between 25 and 30 issues. It's looking like more like 30 though.
That's what I was going to ask, because like as you go, you know, you have this like kind of amount that's in your head that you want to reach, but I mean, if you like felt like you like in Chew needed to dive into more topics like to get to that ending, then would you be going beyond that potentially, or do you kind of think like, oh, I got to really make that at least 30?
I think that in terms of the character arcs, 30 issues is right.
Okay.
I mean, I think that in terms of kind of exploring the world of it more, I'll probably save that for like spin-offs or whatever after issue 30. But in terms of like the Jenkins family story, it's going to be 30. So, I mean, I think John's kind of doing the same thing with Chew, where, you know, the Tony Chew story was 60 issues. Beyond that, you know, you're getting into other areas of that universe.
These two have a lot of questions about Farmhand that might be considered spoilers. So, like at this point, anybody that's listening, go get Farmhand. It's fantastic. Even if you just want to get a taste of it to see how it is. I know like your local library, they have ways you can digitally read it. But I think it's worth your investment. So go ahead and go out there and get it and start getting into this. Like Rob said, like he wants it to kind of go 20 to 30. We're about halfway there. And so like jump in now and catch the second wave with the rest of us here. So guys, I know you have questions. Go ahead and let's get into some spoilers here.
Well, so you said like the third arc is the reveal arc, and there was a lot revealed. I did just reread issue 15 before this because you know, it came out a little bit ago, and especially with, I mean, so much got unpacked, like the flashbacks running parallel to the main story with Monica and Jed, and Jed's wife passing. You know, I was thinking at the end there where Monica is like tempting Zeke to potentially bring back his mother to life, you know, at the end of that, at the end of issue 15, when, you know, this started out like Monica kind of seems like she was in control of this, you know, of Jed's seed, but now it seems like that's kind of taken her over. So is this just like, breaking it down, is Jed's seed kind of taken over Monica and then like just has her memories kind of thing, are you thinking? Or is it more like she just has this enhancing who she is already, and like that's kind of like helping her get her revenge on Jed?
Yeah. I can't give that away.
Okay, yeah.
I think that's a big, that kind of duality, you know, how much of this is Monica and how much of it is this other thing?
Yeah.
Because I mean, we did kind of show or touch upon the idea. I mean, we, from very early on, we always played around with this idea of, you know, where did the idea come from? You know, this idea of, you know, Jed is just minding his own business and this thing hits him, and all of a sudden he has this knowledge that he doesn't even know where it came from. And he really doesn't question it. He just thought, you know, I can use this for, you know, wealth. I can use this for, you know, helping people, whatever. And he does. And there are people along the way, like Tree and other people, who tell him, you know, maybe not. Maybe this isn't such a good idea.
Right.
So, yeah, there's more there. I mean, what you said is going to be a pretty big part of the next, well, yeah, the rest of the arc. I mean, the rest of the story, really, is where is Monica in this? Is Monica here anymore, period? Or is it the other thing that's kind of running the show?
Right.
So yeah, I mean, a lot of farmhand has always been this balance of, you know, kind of distinguishing between science and the supernatural.
Yeah.
And is there any distinguishing between the two at all? I mean, the seed itself is kind of like is this merger of supernatural and the scientific. So yes, I think Monica is kind of like has become sort of the crux of that whole thing. She is now a merger of science and supernatural. So where is she in that? I mean, that's the question we'll be looking at later.
Oh, cool. You know,
So this isn't a spoiler question. This is more just a personal, your choice whether or not, I'm back on the art thought of it. When you made the trees or you made the flowers or you made whatever plant life that is growing, said arms, eyes, ears, a heart even, is that a conscious choice that you wanted it to be a tree? Or is there did you just kind of go with it and just go, okay, this is what it's going to look like? Or did you choose beforehand to be a tree that grows limbs or arms?
It's all experimentation. I mean, a lot of it is just you know, the arms and the legs growing off of a tree kind of thing. That was actually the first. I mean, that was the very first visual that gave me the idea to do the book in the first place. It was just, you know, it was an obvious, like really striking kind of, you know, very sort of disturbing visual that kind of informed the rest of the book. Now, beyond that, a lot of it's just experimenting between, you know, taking, you know, real plants, which can get really weird, and kind of like meshing them with, you know, organs and say, you know, how would this grow in theory? You know, how can you mesh these two in sort of a believable way? You know, I have like, there's plants in issue 1 where like their eyes, they're basically like these plants that open up and the eye kind of like falls out of it. There's just these weird, or like either the nose plant is a flower that opens and it's got a nose in it, but then there's like the little, you know, coming out of the nose.
Yeah.
So I mean, a lot of it's just screwing around, and I mean, there's some really weird plants out there. And what's odd is the further I've gotten into it and kind of researching, you know, stem cells and cloning and how that meshes even with plants. There's quite a few people who have kind of dabbled with using plant structures at least, and meshing them with stem cells to kind of create transplants. There's actually videos online of a guy, he did a TED Talk, I think a few years back, where he actually took, I believe it was an apple. He took an apple and he cut it in the shape of an ear. And he, I think he genetically modified it. I think he took out all the plant matter and just left the structure, and then he injected human stem cells into it. And it actually became kind of like flesh. Really weird, kind of disturbing, probably not going to end well. But yeah, I mean, this stuff's out there.
So I had one question. Maybe you can remind me if it had been in one of the prior issues. Have you done an ear of corn where instead of corn, it's literally ears?
I don't know if I have, honestly. I mean, that seems so easy. You know,
it seems cool on the nose, but being from South Dakota, I'm just going, there's a lot of corn growing right now. I don't know if I should go pick it because who knows, there could be ears in it. So
yeah. I mean, I do like a good pun. That one might be too punny.
You on the nose. Well, yeah, yes.
Right. I mean, Farmhand itself is pretty punny. I mean, the title itself is pretty punny, depending on like, you know, what it's about, you know.
Well, speaking of punny and funny, like the Freetown Funnies, I've loved that addition to the book. You know, I think it's only been around since, I mean, it wasn't issue 1, but the 1 to 2 page closers, I think those are awesome. Like, I just love like immersing in those like funny experiences at the end of each issue, because like usually you're taking in something very like heavy and emotional, and that kind of like leaves you like, okay, that was really funny, that was good.
Cool. Yeah, the guy who makes him is actually my designer on the book, okay. Bert Durand, and I've known Bert for years. We went to college together, and we were both staff cartoonists at the school paper. Cool. And I mean, Bert's always, everything he's ever done it has this tinge of like pun. He loves puns. Like, he's very silly. but he also has a bit of a dark edge to him.
Yeah.
And I've always just been a massive fan of his stuff. So like whenever and we share an office together also. So like, and he's a killer graphic design. He's like an award-winning graphic designer. So whenever I was doing Farmhand, I knew I wanted him working on it. And eventually I convinced him to kind of bring this on and bring in the Freetown Funnies. And yeah, no, he's fantastic.
Yeah, those were so much fun. Well, at the end of issue 15, obviously the big cliffhanger we're left with, and we were talking about character motivations earlier with Zeke. He's staring at the foot of his mom's grave, and he's got the voice of Monica in the background, like, "Hey, I could bring back, what you want." And we've gotten to know Zeke over the 15 issues, and I was like, "No, he wouldn't do that." And then I sat there and like, "But it's his mom. I mean, maybe he would." So like
Right.
Character motivations, like I honestly, it's kind of like the cliffhanger of Walking Dead when Negan's gonna kill some people, and then you get there and you're like, oh wow, he killed 2 people I didn't expect. Like that's what I'm definitely most excited for coming into issue 16, because I'm just like, I think I know Zeke, but I don't. I mean, it could be like Breaking Bad, those split decisions and something changes. So.
Well, yeah, that's good. I mean, the next arc in particular is kind of. It is. I mean, it's Zeke's arc. I mean, he is always the protagonist, but I mean, this is the arc where you get to really find out who he is and what like made him who he is. Yeah, he's not in a good place. I mean, after issue 15. I mean, so this is the arc where he gets tested, and you get to really see, him at rock bottom. But you also get to see him. You see why he is the hero of this thing. So yeah, that's good. I'm glad you're debating that kind of thing, because that's what I wanted. I mean, I want there to be that tension of like, would he do that?
Right.
Like, I don't know.
Questioning myself exactly. I'm like, I swear, I don't think he would. But then I'm like, hey, I mean, you got to be tempted.
Cool.
So that was cool to get in his head.
Cool.
So when you obviously bring the comic to production, because I know before, obviously the pandemic, you had a schedule and you hit every single deadline that you set for yourself. Is that going to kind of be the same ramp up coming in for arc 4? Did like the pandemic give you some more time to kind of flesh things out and get your breather? Because like in your letters column, you said, I know everyone needed to kind of take a break for some creative juices to flow and whatnot. So how did your experience with the pandemic kind of pan out with this?
Oh, it was hell. I mean, it was the timing of it it was just crazy timing. I mean, I had just finished issue 15. I had sent it off to the printer, and I decided, because that entire arc was just brutal to make. And a lot of it is just because the content is so heavy. So I needed to just step away from it, and I decided I'm going to take a hiatus. I'll just kind of chill and, maybe play around with some side projects, whatever. And as soon as I hit, send to send it to the printer, I think that day or the next day, they closed down the schools. And I have three kids. So it's like, okay, well, how long is this going to last? How long can this possibly last? And I was planning to take off that entire next week and just do nothing but, eat taco flavored Doritos and watch pro wrestling probably. Like that was all I wanted to do. And all of a sudden, all three of my kids are home. Like, what is happening? And I don't know if I ever really recovered from it, to be honest with you. I never really got that time to kind of just stop and just be by myself. So yeah, no, it was that first month. I mean, it was fun for a while, because I thought, okay, we were really busy people. Our kids are all at 3 different schools, and they're involved in different things, and they have friends and birthday parties and all this other stuff. And this is nice. We have an excuse to stay home and not constantly be barraged by people asking us to go and do things.
Yeah.
This is going to be awesome. But after that first month, I think my kids were just looking at me like, what? So what do we do today? We're doing the exact same thing we did yesterday. Nothing. So yeah, I mean, that first couple of months, I don't think I did a whole lot of anything. I had taken a big commission list right before the pandemic happened. Thank God for that. So I was kind of slowly working through all the commissions through the entire pandemic. But I don't think I've always been a guy who, like I said, I'm a page a day guy. So I'm a deadline centered guy. If I don't have a deadline, I'm just kind of floundering and I don't know what's going on. So with this thing, it was almost impossible to set a deadline because I didn't even know if comics would be around. This is over. So I, you know, it's weird. I mean, our whole family was just off. I mean, waking up. I mean, usually I'm up every day at 6 in the morning, you know, doing my routines, and there's just no routine. I mean, we're just waking up at 8 o'clock. The kids are waking up or falling out of bed at 9:30. Like nothing makes sense. So I think only in the last month have I really gotten my bearings again.
Yep.
Where I've just decided, you know what? Okay, like the kids are back at school. I have to be up at a certain time to get them to school, so I can. I've retrained myself to start doing these things again, but it took forever to get here. It was awful.
Yeah.
You know, you mentioned that. Oh God, I lost it. But the comics that you didn't know if they're going to be around anymore. I think even like the publishers were trying to figure out like, how do we do this? Like, can we do this anymore? Because DC was like, let's put them out, and then Marvel was like, oh, okay, I guess we'll put them out. And Image had stopped during that whole time putting anything out. And obviously now they started back up again. But yeah, you're right. There was that period of time, and even in the podcast, we kept talking about being like, well, I guess we'll see what happens. Like, I guess there's a lot of stuff we could go back and read and kind of review. And that's what we did. We went back and found these kind of not lesser known books, but hidden gems and try to like talk about those while we were waiting. But you're right. Like the pandemic, not only in terms of, because I have 2 kids too, and I remember he's just starting school, my oldest. And even when they're like, hey, here's all the schoolwork for today, even like that aspect of it being like, okay, so how do we do this? And I got to work. And like,
yeah,
it's figuring out that was a new dynamic because you basically became all of a sudden a teacher. And like you said, they were here all day, and it's weird. It's a weird dynamic because like, you're like, oh, like you said, I would like to hang out with you all day, but there's also stuff that I have to do.
Yeah.
And like, how's the new normal? How do I figure that out? And I even think now, like today, like you were saying, we kind of figured it out a little bit. Like we're living in this new normal, but still, it's not like it's not like it was before.
Yeah.
And so with being a page a day kind of guy, how did you your mental state? Like, how did you bring yourself back to that state? Was it like you had to like retrain yourself? Because I know personally for me, like if I get out of a routine, you got to get back into it. It's almost like working out again. Like, how did you do that?
That's pretty much it. I mean, it really is. I don't know the science behind it. I've heard that, you know, it takes like 7 days of doing a thing to really like ingrain it as a habit.
Yeah.
I forget how many days. I think it's 7. But that's pretty much where I was at. You know, I had to just relearn it all over again. But I mean, you know, all during SIOU, I always kind of experimented with just different ways to be efficient. So, you know, when I first started doing SIOU, I wasn't doing quite a page a day because SIOU, like I wasn't completely full-time comics whenever I was making SIOU for that first year, like, because I wasn't really making any money. So like I still had like graphic design gigs and other things. So, you know, I was making it kind of like, oh, I'll do 3 pages a week and we'll get through this. And then SIOU #1 came out and it had suddenly become a monthly book. And it's like, oh, holy crap. Like I need to like double my production. Like, how am I going to do that? So I just had to hack it and try different ways of doing it. And in over 60 issues, I did a million different models. So like, I'm like a junkie for different kind of efficiency models. Mm-hmm. And I love kind of screwing around with it. And a lot of it now is, you know, I'm 10 years older than I was when I started SIOU. And, you know, with the kids and with everything else, life's just different. I'm 38 now. So like, I've embraced the fact that I am not going to produce what I did when I was like 28. And I'm totally okay with that. Like, I've just decided, screw it. Life's too short. I'm not going to kill myself with this. I'm going to work as hard as I can. And And I just decided to put out less. But,
Yeah.
you know, I'm happy with the quality of it. People enjoy it. And it's still doing what I wanted to do. I'm just going to move at a more deliberate pace. But yeah, the first week, I mean, of me producing again after this pandemic was just, I think I just was looking at my wife like, what? I think, like, I always make this joke of, you know, whenever I would drive my kids to school, I drive past this old shoe store that just always had this now hiring sign. And you just think, like, I could probably run that store if I wanted to. It'd probably be a lot easier than like just making something from nothing.
Yeah.
I could just run a shoe store. So I think when I first started doing this again after the pandemic, I just was looking at my wife like, you know, they're probably still hiring for that shoe store. You know? But yeah, I just had to drill myself again. You know, now it's the habit of, you know, the kids need to be up for 6. You know, they're all at 3 different schools, so me and my wife break it up. I'm usually home for like 8:30. So from 8:30 until, you know, 11:30, I'm doing penciling, you know, or I'm doing writing. And then I have my lunch, and then the afternoon is, you know, it's just different things on different days. But I mean, during the pandemic, we had to figure out how to be creative and productive in the midst of it, because my wife also is a business owner. She builds homes. She's like interior design. She's a contractor. So she's got her whole other thing too. So like we had to do this thing during the pandemic where, you know, we just sat down and said, okay, how are we going to figure this out? Because, you know, we're still needing to make money even though we're stuck at home. And we're blessed that we have the luxury of still being able to be productive and make money at home. So we broke it up. So where Mondays were my day, and she would just hang out with the kids and like just chill basically. But Monday I have a home office, which is where I'm at now, but I also have an office across town. And, you know, fortunately it's secluded enough to where I could still get out even during the pandemic without really interacting with anyone. Mm-hmm. So I got to get out of the house, which everyone was super jealous about, but it was awesome. So Mondays I'd go into work and she'd stay home with the kids. Tuesday, we would split. So, and later at the end of the pandemic, we ended up getting a babysitter who we knew was also isolated. So we would bring her in and she'd come in the mornings, and then I would come home at like 1 and my wife would stay working. And then Wednesday were all mine, and we would both we'd have a sitter. We'd both go out and work. Thursdays, I think were her day, where we had a sitter half the day, and then she came half the day, and I was at work the whole day. And Friday, I just took off completely, stayed home with the kids, and just kind of had a 3-day weekend. Basically, I just folded laundry every Friday. So yeah, I mean, we found out these different ways to kind of hack it, and I think we had some days were just as productive as they were. You know, we had 4-hour days that were more productive than our 8-hour days. So that was interesting. So it's, like I said, I could talk about this stuff all day long, because I think about being productive all the time. And I'm always thinking, how can I do this in a new way that's more efficient, that maintains quality while also like shaving time?
You know, you mentioned the shoe store and how you probably could run that. It'd probably be easier on yourself than create something from nothing. And it is kind of like that, because like you were saying, you may have milestones to hit, like where the story is, but in between, that's all coming from like, I got to figure out how to get there. You had mentioned earlier about listening to the writer's commentary in Breaking Bad, and you actually had talked about like when you wanted to take your creative break to eat, you know, Doritos and watch pro wrestling. I'm a fan of pro wrestling too. Do you need to take creative breaks like that, like throughout the week, to like invest yourself in other material to like kind of get that creative juices going?
I don't do it enough. I don't do it nearly enough, but I think it's something that's kind of like more on my radar now. Like I said, I was pumping out at the height of Chew, I was doing somewhere between 8 to 10 issues a year, which was good, but it also was super brutal. And again, I have way more kids now than I did then. So that like changes everything. So now I've just decided with FARMHAND that I think probably a trade every year, 5 to 6 issues a year, is probably where I'm at this phase of life. And I think at that point, that gives me the space, because I'm not trying to do 10 issues a year. That gives me the space to not only experiment with other things, but also kind of like slow down and kind of breathe a little bit more than I ever did.
Yeah.
Because I was just gone. I was just all the time Shoe on all the time. I mean, John and I, John Lehman, the writer of Shoe, I mean, we joke about it all the time. He's just like, I don't understand. Like he's very lazy, and I'm very not lazy. But over the course of 60 issues, I think I've learned to be a little more lazy, and like he loves it. I mean, I think it's his greatest joy and pride to see that somehow he's infected me with laziness. So yeah, I think I'm starting to kind of think more about that, like taking an hour here or there to just read a book. My big thing right now is I'm not doing, like I actually just started doing this week, where, you know, I'm up at 6 and I'm not on my phone. Like I'm not even picking up my phone or checking emails or social media before noon. And it's been awesome. I mean, like it's like and we're doing all these little things, like even turning our phones off, like do not disturb after 7.
Yeah.
Like creating these little spaces where we can do other things and invest in watch a movie, or read a book, or, you know, just go outside and like roll around in the grass or something. Like, I don't know.
It's some sort of freedom, because like I've been kind of doing something similar where I will let like when I see my phone is low on battery, I will go until like it shuts off, and then I'll put it on the charger like when it's off and let it charge off, and take that time to be like, okay, well, my phone's dead. Like there's no choice for me to do something else. And it almost feels like this sort of freedom that I don't know, I felt for a while, like pre-cell phones.
Yeah.
You think of it as like your gateway to the world, and it is, but also in a way it's kind of like you kind of lose yourself in it. And like you said, you're not really investing in yourself during those times. You had talked about before about you found out during this new normal that sometimes a 4-hour day can be more productive than the 8-hour day. I've been finding that out too with like an 8-hour day, if you're not creatively passionate during that time, can seem like you do 1 to 2 hours of work. But if you take time to like get into it, that 4 hours can really, really be productive. And like you said, taking an hour to read a book sometimes is almost enough to be like, okay, let me go now, because now like my mind's going now and I can write these comics. Do you think that like what you are into, is there something right now that's currently like getting you creatively going in terms of other media?
I actually just started rereading The Umbrella Academy.
Yeah.
I mean, my wife and I have been doing a lot of like shows and stuff, so I didn't expect the show to be any good. No offense. But like it was actually like phenomenal. Like we enjoyed it. We binged the first 2 seasons in like a couple weeks, and I hadn't read Umbrella Academy in years, so I actually picked them all out again, and I've been going through them again, and just really it has been inspiring me. I've been a big fan of Gabriel Bá's forever. So yeah, no, his stuff is kind of taking me back to what I loved about it in the very first, and kind of reminding me of some things. Really why I love comics. I mean, I think one of the downsides of working in comics is that, you know, if you're living it so much and you're living in the industry and you're living, you know, if you're living in the kitchen making the pizza, you're going to be really tired of pizza at some point.
Yeah.
Like I love pizza, but at some point I got to get away from pizza. And social media also makes it kind of difficult with comics because everything's comics.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's important to kind of be reminded from time to time, oh yeah, this is why I do this. Like that simple pleasure of storytelling and of this art. And Umbrella Academy is a big one right now for me.
You know, you say that like becoming too invested into like comics sometimes kind of ruins it for you. It's almost like it ruins the magic, right? You see too much of it and it just becomes too real, and you kind of have to step back and get lost in the storytelling magic to kind of get back into it. Which actually, Gabriel Bá, something that we all love here, Day Tripper. It's a fantastic book, which is kind of like this weird step between realism and it's like a real story, but also it's kind of like out there. Like it's not really a concept that you can kind of explain to somebody, which Farmhand, I feel like, has a lot of that too. It's like kind of like they're real characters, but also, like you said, the guy's making body parts out of plants. Like,
Right.
and do you like living in that kind of world that's like it's not a clear defined reality where it's like can be whatever like I want it to be.
Yeah. I mean, again, because like my brain, like I said, goes off into, I don't know if it's just a phase of life, like that old man, like how does things work? Like how do we figure this out? So there's a part of me that always, wants to figure out how would this work in real life. But then I have to remind myself, oh no, it's comics. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like whatever. Which is what I loved about Umbrella Academy, the show, was, there's time travel, but they never explain anything. Like how is there? Okay, there's a suitcase, and it's just they time travel with the suitcase. How does that work? It doesn't matter how it works. It's awesome. So I mean, I like living somewhere storytelling wise. I like having big ideas that seem kind of crazy and implausible. I mean, Chew was that also. I mean, Chew was just, guy who gets psychic visions from when he eats. That's a little weird, but also like, it's kind of awesome. It's rooted, you can root it in real life. So there's a touchstone so people can relate to it, but you're not shackled to reality with it. So you can kind of walk that line of reality and surreal reality.
Yeah.
That I just live there. I may live there in my real life too. I don't know.
You're right about you though. Like when I first started reading it and I was telling these guys about it before they got into it, I was kind of like, he eats people. He takes a bite and he can like see everything about them. I don't know. You have to like read it. And like when people hear that, they're like, what do you mean he eats people? And I'm like, well, he takes a bite. He doesn't like eat them. Like it's just a little bit, maybe like a finger or something like that.
But I mean, that was the thing though. Whenever we first announced Chew, back in like, I think it was March or April of 2009. Like the reactions people had were so crazy because there were people who were just like, that's so ridiculous. That's unacceptable. Like they just couldn't accept it. But I've always been a guy that kind of has looked at like, I guess the bigger picture of things. And I just would answer those people like, but you're reading X-Men. Yeah. Like you're reading about like a hairy midget with like knives who shoot out of his hands. Like, come on. Like this whole thing is ridiculous. I mean, Dr. Manhattan, he's a blue guy who's naked, and like he's God, essentially. This is crazy stuff. So I think, the suspension of disbelief is key to everything. So yeah, I think you got to have fun with it. So I've gotten to the point now where all of my ideas I've been getting, and I've been getting a lot of ideas, new ideas lately for new projects. They all kind of straddle that line between, relatable, there's a touchstone for us, so we know what this is, we can relate to it, but there's also like this bigger, surreal, weird thing that's just really interesting. It makes us want to look at it,
Well, I mean, even like you said, you pitched Chew, and you're like, hold up, we haven't even told you about this rooster that'll be coming up later, and it's like, like you have to get, like it does go to places where you're like, it's very surreal, it's very out there, but like you said, it's comics, and I think that's a big thing that people who don't read comics a lot of times have a trouble getting into is that yes, you can read a comic that is totally realistic, like you can read a criminal book and be like, yeah, that's for you, but like you said, it's not as crazy like X-Men. The guy shoots lasers out of his eyes.
Right.
He wears some glasses, and all of a sudden he can't. They block it. And but then you're like, what do you mean though? There's a chicken who's like a secret agent. Be like, well, like calm down. Like it's not that crazy. It's actually probably more realistic than the Cyclops. So, Rob, we're coming up on time here. You had mentioned that you're thinking about ideas for other projects besides Farmhand. Is there anything coming out soon or are you just totally invested in Farmhand right now that you want people to know about?
Right now, I mean, all of my time's on either Farmhand the comic or on developing the TV show. I'm writing the script for AMC for the pilot. So like a lot of my time's into that too. I've basically just been kind of like compiling pitches. I tend to write a lot of Post-it notes and just scribble things down on my phone. So I'm kind of getting to the point now where I'm shaping a handful of them. And I don't know how much of it's, I mean, I've played around with the idea of writing things for other artists and that kind of thing, but I don't know when any of this stuff's coming out. You know, I've talked to a couple like publishers and whatnot about potentially doing some of this. But I'm a guy that I tend to work best when I'm focusing on one thing at a time, just because I'm so anal about this stuff. Like I really want to engage with whatever I'm making fully. So who knows when this stuff's coming out, but yeah, I mean, Farmhand's the big one right now. We're still on hiatus. I'm looking at bringing it back probably in early 2021. And we'll see. Other than that, I have a couple ideas for miniseries and maybe even a one-shot. I'm actually playing around with possibly self-publishing something, which is a whole other thing. A lot of my focus right now is just really on kind of, reassessing how I want to run my career and how I want to relate to the fan base.
Yeah.
And, during this quarantine, another thing I did was build a website. I had to learn Wix. It was a whole thing. But I'm really happy with how it came out. And a lot of it is, the good thing about it is it really allows me to directly interact with my fan base I have an app. I'm in the Wix app. Like I can direct message people and they can direct message me. It's kind of like a new, a modern fan newsletter kind of thing. So I'm really just focused on that. Like, how do I like bring the classic comic, reader creator relationship? How does that translate to now in a way that doesn't, make me crazy?
Yeah. Is it just robguillory.com?
Yeah.
robguillory.com, like you mentioned, Farmhand, about halfway done, and then it'll be back early 2021. And then also, I know a lot of people like to do this, and we mentioned with Phil Hester, he was talking about Family Tree, and they're also like about to bring it to TV. Jump on now, jump on now, get invested, and then you can watch it when it's on AMC. Rob, thank you for the interview and the conversation. I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah,
and
so much. This is a pleasure.
We look forward so much to your work in the future as somebody who loves Chew and us now loving Farmhand. Always on our radar, Rob Guillory. So
thank you. Thank you guys for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you. SiouxperCon 2020. We are Wednesday Comics Podcast. Enjoy the rest of the con.